So it's 2026, and in the spirit of new beginnings and new horizons, I would like to honor the old and the new horizon coming in by sharing and talking a little bit about the things that I'm learning, relearning, and unlearning in my business, my personal life, how I'm thinking about and feeling about the future, how I'm continuing to be of service to those around me, realizing my potential, trying to make as much of a positive impact as possible with the least amount of cost or toll on my soul. It's quite a tall order when you think about it in this day and age. But I think that some useful and appropriate framing can come from a particular quote that originates from the writer and the futurist Alvin Toffler, who in the 1970s wrote that in the 21st century, the illiterate of the world won't be those who can't read and write, but those who fail to learn, relearn, and unlearn. And it's always stuck with me because it's such an interesting way of thinking about what's required of us and how there might be new ways to see what we can do to get the very best from what's inside, especially when we're looking at the huge velocity and intensity of things changing and how we can learn, relearn, and unlearn things, hopefully in quick order, to make the difference that's needed in our lives and in the world. So that's what I'm going to be exploring today, the things that I'm learning, relearning, and unlearning around me. And I find it useful because so much of what we find adds value in our lives is not always what we add, but sometimes what we can strip away and let go of, so that there's a better and more efficient ratio between signal and noise. And we definitely live in a noisy world. So there's a certain amount of kind of discernment and curation on what you're focusing on, what really needs your best ability to articulate, so that you meet the future with everything you need to be able to meet it with. So let's start with learning. So something that I'm dedicating a lot of time to learning, and when we learn, we're adding to our knowledge inventory. If you think about it, we're allowing the information that we're soaking up, hopefully, to become wisdom or something applicable, so that it can become useful. It can become something that you can embody and carry out into the world. But this takes time and it takes some intention. So the thing that I'm investing a lot of time learning, adding to my library, is all to do with artificial intelligence. So I'm looking at this mainly in a business building and sort of information companion capacity. Now, like hundreds of millions of people, I enjoy working with AI and learning how it works, in particular LLMs, large language models, because it allows me to store more information, keep track of what I'm doing. It's a great companion for keeping me on track on a number of different fronts. And obviously, it makes me so much more productive than I was 2 or 3 years ago. In fact, it's so difficult to think about all the things I used to do without ChatGPT or without all of the other things that I use now on an everyday basis that I almost don't pay attention to. So it's really quite stark how much of a difference it made in such a short space of time. Now, what's interesting here is that there's a lot to pay attention to outside of just AI. So firstly, there's a very well-worn parallel between the rise of AI and the rise of the internet. So even though they're 30 years apart, there's definitely some stark and very interesting correlations between how the rise of AI and the rise of the internet in this age of connection and information has really taken very similar paths, very similar exponential paths upwards. There's been a slow uptake, in the beginning, all the kind of the early adopters and the slow kind of creeping motion forward. And then suddenly, almost as though it happens overnight, whole cultures are shaped. It blows wide open. Everything changes. Countries, individuals enter into different agreements with each other. Entire new industries are born. And the way that money, information, content, how all of these things move and how fast they move, changes course in a way we've not seen before. So the result of all this is that even though there are definitely familiar patterns, a lot of it is unprecedented, and unprecedented is probably an understatement on what we're dealing with here. So what's interesting is that once again, our fear of uncertainty causes us to view anything that is unprecedented with suspicion, right? We don't like it. We don't like the feeling of kind of discomfort and, a lack of familiarity. And it's not entirely unfounded. As we've heard so often with artificial intelligence, the real complaint might not only be that machines will usher in our demise, in some apocalyptic way, but rather that human beings will possibly be the ones who ultimately, through some form of stupidity or carelessness or absent-mindedness, or maybe all three, will be the ones to set off the nuclear codes. So it's interesting because at every huge kind of, progression of society, of civilization, there's always the risk of extermination, of kind of the very worst scenario playing out. And this is something I've thought a lot about, I've researched, I've written a lot about this year, and something that will, I think, continue to be something I deeply think about and try and learn as much about to widen my perspective on coming into the new year. Because in that uncertainty, there's no real kind of certain answers as much as we might want it. One kind of imaginative scenario that I feel is useful to think about, to point out, is something that I have heard Geoffrey Hinton say. And this was passed on to me by a friend originally, but he has this idea of AI and humanity, their relationship being likened to something of that of a mother caring for its child, perhaps its wayward child. And I find that interesting as maybe one possible scenario where our relationship with this thing that we've created ends up maybe taking care of us in a way that we're not able to for ourselves. And I think that would be interesting and definitely compelling in terms of an idea of how the future may play out. So when it comes to this and how I'm using AI and I'm dedicating a lot of time to learning how to shape LLMs in new and useful ways, how to create chatbots, intelligent workflows, use it to really rewire my business and my businesses, understanding the importance of connecting up data and interconnecting different bits of knowledge so that what you ask AI to do has more and more context. It's smarter if you think about it, and learning how to kind of control and curate that knowledge environment. It's really interesting. It's like building a second brain. Tiago Forte talks a lot about that. So in some of the work that I'm currently doing within the VUCA group, a great business, there's a really important edge of my learning that I dedicate a lot of time into there. And not only is it something that will develop into an important advantage for that business that I'm helping to do this with, but also really how all businesses, service providers, solopreneurs, organizations, everyone will really have, some kind of absolute need to embrace some area of artificial intelligence in the future, in the very near future, I think. Just like we all had to learn how to create websites and Facebook pages and Instagram profiles and learn how to use Google and Google Ads, right? We adapted into that and now it's completely normal. In fact, it's not just normal, it's the minimum requirement. And I think AI in many ways will become the minimum requirement for interacting and living and working in the future. But also because AI is so completely new, no one can yet claim expert mode in it. I'm really kind of skeptical of, these experts who've arrived on the scene, who've maybe, changed a couple of words in their resume and now, look at me, I'm an AI expert. It's led me to believe that anyone who claims this is either a crook or perhaps knows even less than you do. Anything that is totally new and is still emerging, still in the middle of a hype cycle, requires a lot of time and curiosity and concentration to invest in, to really learn about, so that it can be something that, finds a use in your life beyond just the novelty. So if it's something that you're curious about or that you're wanting to spend more time in, I really encourage you this year to really spend half an hour a day or 1 or 2 hours a week really dedicating some time to learning a bit more about AI. There are so many amazing free bits of content, courses, podcasts, articles, videos, all sorts of amazing sources of information available that would really, be a big misstep if you didn't try and dedicate a little bit of time to learning some of the basics and some of how, it's got that really amazing transformative power to really shift things for the better. Lastly, one of the super enjoyable things that I've been getting into with AI is that I've learned how to vibe code. Now, it's a funny word, isn't it? Vibe coding. Now, I'm not a programmer. I've got zero coding or programming experience. I wouldn't be able to tell you Python from React. And I'm not just making those words up. But at the same time, I can articulate an idea and I can, frame it in a creative and a clear way. And that is all that's needed these days to be able to, at least in some level of quality, create websites, apps, tools that are now possible to be created through these programs like Replit, like Lovable, or even Cursor. And those are the ones that I've been using over the last couple of months to vibe code. So instead of coding it with coding language, which is like Greek to me, you're able to code it with vibes, with conversation, with context, in the same way that you might go about talking to your favorite LLM, your favorite AI. And it's been an amazing process of being able to creatively freewheel through an idea, get the AI to work on it as your little companion, to not only realize the idea, but to create a full app, to create the full experience. Note takers, form builders, transcription tools. I've been creating all of this. In fact, one of the things that I'm creating for my community and an experience that I'm going to be sharing with the Humble Mind community shortly is an app that allows you to enter into a one-on-one kind of round-robin match-up service. So you get matched up with other community members and you can meet them, you can take the time to break the ice together and get to know each other. And this is all something that a couple months ago I wouldn't be able to do, but now I can create it, I can customize it, I can brand it, and it looks great and it worked great. And of course, along the way, it's teaching me how to think as a programmer, or at least in some kind of way, how to put these sorts of things together that otherwise would have remained completely hidden from what I could do. So if you're curious, really would recommend checking out those tools to help you navigate this sort of potentially mystifying space that thankfully you wouldn't have to deal with, anymore, because now you don't have to code, you can vibe code. So that's something I'm really continuing to pay attention to and to add to my knowledge base as something that I'm learning. So if we're moving into the second part of Toffler's quote, he talks about the importance of relearning, of learning something again, whether it's a topic or an idea, but perhaps taking a different approach to a similar outcome because maybe things have changed. And so there's two things that I'm relearning in particular. The first has got to do with how I build communities and how I look at community building in general. Now, community building is not only a big passion of mine, it's something that I've been doing for a long time, connecting people in the, important conversations and places that matter. But I've also got a business and a community that supports that. It's called Humble Mind. We've got a thriving community, 600 members across 30 different countries. I help others build communities, whether that's small businesses or larger organizations. We've got a lot of projects going on right now. It's really exciting. There's also a boot camp that I run a couple times a year, where through 4 weeks, I help people to really learn the ins and outs of community building for themselves, for their own projects, and learn how to really step into the role of being a community builder. It's great fun. But part of doing that in a way that resonates, in a way that can help us to separate the noise from the signal, is also learning how to think through what really makes communities tick and why we pride the importance of communities, why communities are important. Well, firstly, if you think about it, we're all products of communities. We all come from a school, a society, a street, a neighborhood, a church, even the family unit. That is that community nucleus. All of these are combinations of individuals living, working together in some kind of established structure. So community is the way that we satisfy a couple of really important human needs. We derive a really deep need for belonging and acceptance as part of who we are, learning how to define our character, our identity, our goals, the things that we want to do in community with others. It would be a lot harder to do that if you were alone or perhaps in the wrong community. That's why people stuck on a desert island alone eventually go mad, right? There's no one else to help to define reality around you. It's also an important space for us to learn how to handle conflict and work through disagreement and having difficult conversations. Communities are really, really effective containers for learning these sort of really specialized human skills or social skills. Being able to make sense of information, which might not be clear in some way, to test new ideas or have a safe space to be able to grow and ask difficult questions. It's just an incredible place when you get it right to be able to have a community that, is there for making the world a better place or to, work on a tough challenge in some way. For me, it's a really high watermark of what humans can do, which is inspiring and obviously provides a really strong sense of joy and purpose for me, and something I'm always happy to be working on, building a business and a greater community, an ecosystem of communities around. At the same time, what's interesting is that community building is really hard. It's tough. I ain't gonna shit you. It requires a few different skills and affinities to be turned on and to be ushered in the right direction in order to be effective. There's also no guarantee, even if you get all of those things right, that any of this will work or that there will be, a success in your community, depending on how you might measure that, whether it might be 10 people or 10,000 people. It really does depend on, I've found, one really important thing, and that is whether the right people are in the room. So this is a topic that I call people curation. It's interesting. You curate a space, you curate a gallery, but can you curate a room with people in it? And I think you absolutely can. And that is what makes a community an experience that you want to stay for, or maybe, head to the exit. So what's interesting is that it's not just about like-mindedness. You don't just want to hang around people who are like you all the time. In fact, sometimes too much like-mindedness can kill the vibe. It can kill a community and the sense of energy, before it even starts. But ensuring that everyone in your community, in your space, has a sense of openness, a shared intention, and a willingness to contribute. Not all the time necessarily, but at the times and the rhythms that matter, so that there's something that can sustain the experience. And this is what I'm relearning. This is what I'm relearning about how to create and sustain those effective community experiences. Really, it's down to what I'm calling intentional interconnection. Intentionally, consciously, interconnecting the people around you in your community. And this is a really, really key role of any community leader or builder, whether it's online or real life. It means that you undertake a process to facilitate the connection between two or more members. And this is in total contrast to like networking. I hate networking. I even hate the word network. It sounds so transactional and 1980s. This is not blunt, sort of aimless networking just to throw out business cards or wasting half an hour slots in your calendar with someone you'll never talk to again. But rather, the ability to be able to see that these two individuals absolutely must be in the same room together. There is a shared interest. There's a similar energy. There's an outlook on the world, maybe a similar way of speaking or style of conversation, or other little data points that you can pick up in knowing these two or more people that will absolutely have the bearings of making a good match. And I've seen it happen in the Humble Mind community and also on our bootcamp. I've seen friendships bloom. I've seen businesses start, really. I've seen collaborations take off. And it all started with the ability to create that space or create that little match, that you should meet John, you should meet Charlotte. These two should absolutely meet, and then you take it from there. When you can curate the environment in the right way, but also focus on that intentional interconnecting people around you, there's really something magical and special that powers new relationships, new friendships, new opportunities even. And the beautiful thing here as well is that it really does create a really strong blowback as well. I've had great referrals. I've had friendships come my way as well. I've had amazing pieces of work and opportunities to travel as a result of doing this, of putting people together in a room, putting them in touch, recommending that they get on a call, or they meet up in person in a similar place. And it's always yielded something positive. So I'm really focusing on that as a way to regroove my ongoing journey in community building and learning and relearning what that entails as we continue to jump into the future. The second thing that I am relearning, and it kind of sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. I am busy relearning how to fall in love with how to write. Writing is thinking. Writing is life. It's learning how to better articulate the core crispness of an idea and being able to assess whether that is a good idea or not. Now, it's funny because I write all the time. I haven't stopped writing. It's not like I put it down for 5 years or something like that. I'm writing all the time. I'm writing articles. I'm writing reports. I'm writing LinkedIn posts. I'm writing newsletters, emails, scripts. It's a huge part of my work and how I deliver what I do. None of that would be possible without me being able to write or write well. But business style writing, if we can call it that, or copywriting especially, can really flatten your ability to use, your imagination, and it really puts your ability as a writer in a box. It can get you focused on conversion, on making sales, on clarity, on reaching people and directing them, and that's good because you want them to go somewhere, you want them to take action. But the problem with that being the only definition for writing and what writing can do as a superpower is that it ends up just being transactional, and there's so much more in the exchange. So whether you're, trying to articulate an idea or refine a concept, not to sell, but to illuminate or to educate, or just for yourself to think through and to learn how to think through, it's a totally different task. It's a different level of writing. It requires a slower, sort of deeper rhythm. You're structuring something. And in particular, I enjoy writing essays, sometimes some poetry, but it's essays in this particular case where I have an idea, or, I observe something, or I might look at, a common trait of behavior that we might share. Something that I've just written is why electricians are so, electricians, plumbers, but in particular, locksmiths. Why are locksmiths so expensive? It's like, why? Why is that? Have you never noticed that wherever you go? Why are locksmiths so expensive? And that ends up being something where, there's other things to explore. That's a piece that's on my Substack if you want to go and check that out. And it's such a wonderful way to kind of free myself from what I thought writing always had to do, which was, have a point, have an audience, have a purpose, have a transaction in mind, done. Rather, you have the space to ask questions and to see where those take you, kind of in a curious way. And there's such a joy in that, in following that without an agenda, without insisting on an outcome. And the more that I do that, the more that I relearn how to write in a different way, so many things, come back because it doesn't have to be successful. It doesn't have to make money. I've had moments writing a poem or an essay where it's not even me writing anymore. My fingers are cracking away on the keyboard, especially late at night. I've found that, if I can be sitting down and the kids are asleep and I can be sitting with my remarkable, something shifts in my brain and the words just fall out. And, I'm learning to befriend that part of myself, this part of myself inside there that can operate in a different state. In this case, the flow state, learning how to flow things out rather than thinking through them all the time. And writing is such a great way to cultivate that voice, to get to know it a little bit, to unlock it. Because the inner writer doesn't always get to see the light of day. That's the part that often gets appropriated by work, by the need to produce, to sell, to deliver. And that's fine. That'll always be welcome. It pays the bills. It helps to keep the fridge full. But there are other branches, on that tree of the same gift that I want to be able to speak to, that I want to be able to reach to. So this is something that I'm really kind of consciously developing and thinking about and spending a little bit more time being curious about what writing and me as a writer can continue to do. I don't have to be successful with it. I think that there's a book or two in me for sure in the future, but I'm not looking to, absolutely have to make a career out of it. I'm just enjoying writing one sentence at a time and seeing how far these little curious explorations go. By the way, I am planning something called a Curiosity Summit, which is something I really hope that you can sign up to and check out the page as a waiting list. It's going to be an online and in real life event happening in 2026. I won't say more. I'm just going to put a link down there in the show notes in the description, and I'd love for you to check it out. Curiosity Summit. Let your curiosity get the better of you. Now we're turning to the part of what Alvin Toffler called unlearning. And I think this is the hardest one. As human beings, we prioritize what we see with our eyes, what we can judge to be in reality, and anything that is added and visible is what we see as valuable in front of us, right? So the whole idea of learning is all about kind of progression. It's about adding more to what to adding more to your cart, and more is better. That's kind of the logic that we've been swamped with for, the last couple of decades. Now, why Alvin Toffler's quote is so kind of arresting, especially when you think about the idea of unlearning. It's the kind of thing that almost sort of startles you and makes you, what? I don't understand. How can you unlearn, right? What does that mean? It's sort of almost frustrating in how confusing it might be, or what it forces you to confront. Now, when I think of unlearning, sometimes that might mean forgetting what you know. Sometimes it might mean holding a totally different possibility of whether something might be true in your mind, sometimes simultaneously with that other belief that you're normally holding on to. Sometimes it also requires completely rewiring how your neurons might be firing together. And that's hard, because so much of what we do every day is habitual, right? All of our beliefs and our thoughts and the questions we ask and the time of day we get up and what we have for breakfast and the way we take to work, on the tube or in the car. It's all of these things are pre-programmed. They're kind of done for us already, which is fine. We have to operate like that. There's an evolutionary mechanism that ensures that those sorts of things need to happen. There's a good reason why we don't pay attention to what our habits drive us to do unconsciously. But at the same time, if it's something that you're not aware of, especially over a long period of time, you end up going, whoa, okay, I've kind of, accumulated a whole lot of dirt on my windscreen here. And now I've got to stop adding. I've actually got to start subtracting. And this is something that I was really inspired in a previous podcast conversation with a friend of mine, Francisca Gonda. It's worth checking that episode out, where she talked about creating capacity, kind of this deepening your reservoir, building capacity for other things that you might want to hold. And to do that, to create capacity, you need to create space. And that's what unlearning really, I think, is about. It's about creating space for, right? Because you have to kind of divorce some of these things that you've been adding and, adding perhaps, for a long time, perhaps even since you were a child, so that there is space for new things to be learned, new things to be substituted in, which will add more value, which are more useful to the person you are now. So with this in mind and the idea of unlearning in mind, One of the things that I'm actively unlearning right now and have been for the last few years, and certainly, it's a journey that will continue into this year and beyond, is around money. These are attitudes and behaviors that I've kind of noticed and really sort of started to pay attention to in the last year or two. And that's always the first step, being able to notice what's there, not identifying with them, but noticing them. It's something that I've been able to distinguish, that thoughts are not facts. They're not something that absolutely carry everything about you inside of them. For example, I can shift from saying, I am poor, I'm penniless, no one wants to work with me, I don't have money, I'm worthless without money. All of these kinds of things that maybe we don't say outright, but definitely we hold on to as beliefs, and they form a lot of our thoughts, our inner dialogue. That opposed to, it seems that money is not flowing to me in the way that I know it can right now. Now that's a small shift, but it's definitely something that helps to create the necessary healthy distance away from the habitual thoughts and the patterns that often, define so much of our lives and ultimately so many of our behaviors, what we do, how our decisions are made, how reckless we might be with certain things. And it's taken a while for me to realize that I am not those beliefs, especially around something like money, where I'm not locked into this sort of abusive high school boyfriend style relationship with money, but rather I have a choice and I can reframe it in a different way. Now, it's also worth thinking about and defining money in this conversation too. I'm interested whether this might resonate with you. Money is how I at least make sense of energy, of value, and of relationships, right? If you think about money, it's really the underlying metric, the leading indicator that we've built around the modern world, right? We measure time in money. We measure effectiveness in money. We measure what an entire country's output, all of the creativity and the talent and the things that everyone can do, those millions of people, there's a dollar figure assigned to what they can do. Whether or not that's useful or accurate is beside the point. But the point is that we've denominated our human existence in the form of money, of currency. And there's many good reasons for that. That's fine that we do that. In many ways, it's the market speaking. It's how we're able to transact and buy and sell the things we want, and in many ways live good lives. But at the same time, it creates a sort of a default assumption that I think we don't really pay attention to, or even have the ability to notice how big that is and how that defines really who we are. We let it define who we are, and we let it make decisions on our behalf. And in fact, the bigger that kind of hold that it might have on you is, the harder it is to spot it, the more ingrained it is. Now, for me growing up, money was something that always was with other people. It was something that other people had. If we happened to have it, then it would be only a matter of time before it would run out. It was elusive. It was something you had to hold on to with kung fu fingers. You had to make sure that, you use it now, or, you got to save it. You kind of, make sure that you don't run out of money, because it always does. It always ends up finding a way to escape your hands, like trying to catch a bird. And this sort of belief of lack was definitely something that followed me into my adulthood. It's something that I also chose to stick with me, where eventually, once I learned to spot it, I realized, well, the underlying assumption under all of this, under money, how it's always, it's always around the corner. It's always almost there. It's kind of like, hard to get hold of. It's like it's this energy, that I just can't get enough of, no matter how much I try. The assumption under all that is that I don't deserve it. And I don't deserve not just a bit of it, but a lot of it. In fact, I definitely don't deserve a lot of it. And it's such a crazy belief, because if I look at how generous I am in my relationships, the fact that I'm a good dad, I'm a good friend. I like to show up for people. I like to be my best self when I'm working, when I'm thinking, when I'm sharing, when I'm doing stuff. I am definitely sharing, and my currency of my energy is really quite open and really quite giving. So why is there this little thorn on my side that insists on telling me that I don't deserve good things, that I don't deserve, in this case, the money that I should be making or that I deserve to be making? So that is the belief that coming into this year, I am no longer prepared to accept that as a belief, as something that is not only a belief and a conversation that happens in my head sometimes, but also something that shows up in my decisions and how I end up really making the kinds of decisions that are totally antithetical, totally, against what I really want to be doing, and the kinds of things that actually close off making money. And that's because I have thought about money as this thing that you've got to hold on to, and that, if it slips through your fingers, the only way to stop it from doing that is to hold it tighter and to not let it flow. And that's the real thing to understand, that I'm still learning to understand about money, that I'm unlearning and substituting with a new definition of what money is. It really is a currency. Obviously, it's a form of, you have many forms of currency with money, but it's a currency of energy. It's a currency of being able to understand that the universe and everything around us works in natural gives and takes. It works in ebbs and flows. It has to go in order to come back. It has to move left in order to move right. If you pull something too much in one direction and force it into a certain box, it's going to affect the other side of the equilibrium, and that is where it shows up in not showing up for you. That is where it feels and seems like it's not coming through for you. So, with all of these things, and learning to accept it, learning to notice it, learning to kind of rejig how I think about money, I am learning to talk to my spouse about it. I'm talking to my friends about it. I try and read and educate myself about it. And one particular thing that I've started to do, which has really helped me to remind me that the story I have in my mind about money is maybe it's not right. Maybe there's a different way to see it. Is I keep the income notifications that come up on my phone every time I get paid, every time money comes in through one of my businesses or to me. There's an income notification that comes in from my bank, and instead of swiping it away, I'll keep it there, sometimes for days or even a week or two, and I'll let each of those notifications stack up so that every time I check my phone, or maybe not necessarily every single time, but when I need to, or when I can be open to the reminder, I can see on my phone that there are at least 3 or 4 or 5 sources of income that is telling me, rewiring my crazy little brain, that money's on its way, that I'm allowing things to flow in my direction, and that there can be an abundance and a healthy flow of money coming to me. Here it is. It's not make-believe. These are actual, income. These are actual bank notifications coming in to tell me that it's coming my way, that I deserve it, that it's okay, and that I'm supported, that I have resources, that I'm making it work, and that I deserve not just that, but much more. So that's a really powerful one, and I'm always on the lookout for, little hacks and little fun little tricks like that to help me to just, remind myself, oh, okay, you know what? I'm on the path. It's okay. Money's coming my way. Even if a whole lot of it needs to be going out right now, it's okay. That's what it does. Because, you can't receive with a closed hand. And that's really the whole thing to be unlearned here. So that's a big one for me, and how I'm learning to not let it get stuck, but really, allowing a longer runway and a bigger, sort of vessel of acceptance to take place. So that's it. There's a lot of other things that I'm learning, checking out, listening to, podcasts that I'm enjoying, books I'm reading, and a lot of travel plans coming up next year. where we'll be, as a family, taking some time in Central America. We'll be traveling to South Africa. We'll be going to Portugal. We'll be going to Spain and perhaps even further afield. So a lot of change, a lot of new winds coming to fill our sails, which is very exciting. And it helps to breathe life and a lot of energy into my projects. But these are the things that are really kind of defining those leading edges, the things that I'm learning about, what I'm adding, the things that I'm relearning, kind of retraining, and the things that I'm unlearning, that I'm making space for, making space to receive. It's always an interesting way to celebrate, what's working, and to also look forward to the new year with some of the threads, some of the long-running threads that I'm pulling into the new year, the questions that I'm still working on. And that's why I feel that New Year's resolutions and, all of that crap almost never works, because, 2 weeks into it, you've probably forgotten it already. And it's not like life starts again on the 1st of January. Life continues, and you're pulling in these threads into the next year and the next year again and again. The trick is to know which ones to be pulling, which ones to be leaving, which ones to be picking up again, and be attentive to what's being called and where you're being called next. Because there's no rule book. That's the thing to always remind yourself about, and something I often remind myself about. No one's going to do any of this stuff for you. So you might as well jump with both feet, be honest, get support, and go in bold into what's in front of you. So this is how I try and show up in the very best version of who I am and what I can offer. Someone who can connect people, be of service, be creative, and make a difference. And I know that if I am attentive to these questions, these things that I'm learning, relearning, and unlearning, I know I will. So I hope that this has helped you to reflect on these areas as well for yourself in your life, who you are as you show up as a friend, as a partner, as a brother, as a father, mother, sister, co-worker, business leader, whoever you are, and how you're stepping into this next exciting new year. I hope that these ideas can continue to spark something, and definitely look forward to being your companion in the adventure ahead.